but I'd like to begin with some opening words from Annie and family, who are our sponsors for our shir this evening. Zecher Nishmas Paul, Pesach David ben Avraham, whose Yahrzeit falls out on the 12th of Shavat. So welcome everyone, and I'll give the floor to Annie for a few moments, and then we'll continue.
I would have prepared, but I didn't. The only thing I can say is I'd like to thank you for doing this for me. It means a lot, and it means a lot for me to have this being done for B'nai Torah, which was Paul's home away from home. Have I lost you?
No, we're here, and I hear everything you're saying.
Okay, can we wait just 1 minute? Jack Samuel's trying to get on. Says
He is on.
He's on.
But he can't hear it, he says. Can somebody help him?
Let's just see.
Can you tell from your end?
We'll do how we used to do it in school. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can? Everyone please give me a thumbs up if you could hear? Okay, so for those people that have video, okay, Jack is unable to hear. Jack, the only thing I could Jack, I have to
no video, no audio.
Chat with him for a moment. Yep.
Going.
I just wrote him that he should try his phone.
Yeah, it may be better because it looks like everyone else is on.
Okay. I have an idea. I'm going to call him. He can just listen.
That's fine. Okay, he just left, and I think he's going to log back in. I would like to wait one moment to see if he just does.
Yeah, let's just give him 1 more minute.
Not a problem. So while we're doing that, I just want to echo Annie's words this evening. First of all, I'd like to thank Annie and the family for sponsoring our shir. And I'd like to thank the Kehila. I'd like to thank Congregation B'nai Torah for pulling it together and not only having our shir this evening, but there will also
or just listen.
There will also be a special kiddush on February the 4th at the shul, and the kiddush is sponsored by the Forman family and a number of other families, and there is still time to sponsor this Tu B'Shvat Kiddush. So if you would like to, please be in contact with the shul office so that your name can be added to the list of sponsors for the February 4th Kiddush. So please don't wait. If tomorrow, first thing, if you're not already a sponsor, please, we'd love to be able to see that from any of our participants this evening. We often tend to think of a Yahrzeit as a sad time, but Chazal tell us that it's actually, and it should be, a joyous time. We often make l'chaims because it's an opportunity for the neshama to be closer to the Rabbanu Shalom. And just from the short discussions that Annie and I have been having recently, Paul's neshama has a lot to be happy for as well. There are some recent simchos in the family, and not just for the nachas that he has from his children and from his grandchildren, looking down, as I'm sure he is, but the recent simchos of Avram and Ayelet's son, who was just engaged, and I understand also there is that Aryeh and Mayan are making a Hachnasat Sefer Torah for Paul, or have recently done so, and are having a bar mitzvah together with that. And the grandchildren also continue to make siyumim. So this type of shir and memorializing Paul through a shir is nothing new to the, and doing so in the fashion of Torah is nothing new to the Forman family. So we're just continuing along those same lines. So we are doing so in a joyous way through the study of Torah. And our topic for tonight is lessons in Jewish leadership. And I thought it was very apropos because Paul was a friend and a mentor to me. And there were often some very outright and direct lessons that he could assist me with. And he would say, Rabbi Rosenberg, this is something I think that, we ought to do. And when he said we, that was the collective we, but he really meant you. And he said it in such a humble and nice way. And that was always how he always proffered advice, was like, don't you think we ought to be doing this? And I said, yes, I ought to be doing that. And it was just a beautiful way of communicating together with Paul. And I think that was his general demeanor as well, was always to act in a very humble way, but at the same time, leading a path. And that's why I thought our topic for this evening of lessons in Jewish leadership, which I think we're going to find some direct connections in Paul's life, would be an appropriate topic for this evening. And sometimes you have to go to the end in order to understand the beginning. So tonight we're going to start off with Parshat Vayelech. And then we're going to work our way back to Parshat Bo. So starting off with the first pasuk in Parshat Vayelech, and I'll just share most of you have the, if I can bring it up on my screen here, I'll try to do that. Just the parsha. I don't, let me just see if I could share this here. I didn't particularly put together a,
It's just that right now I don't have access to the material.
a source sheet for this evening, but I think that just simply looking at the psukim themselves will give us some highlights, or at least a start for where we're heading to. If I could ask everyone to please put their microphones on mute so that all the participants can hear the share clearly. Thank you. So the Torah begins with Vayelech Moshe Vayidaber es hadvarim ha'eleh el kol Yisrael. Moshe went and spoke all of these words to all of Yisrael. Vayomer alehem ben mea v'yesrim shana nochi hayom. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to try to mute everyone if I can, because I'm just getting too much background noise. Alan, if you're on, if I could ask you to please, I don't have control over the mute all, but if you could do so, I'd appreciate that.
I muted everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Not him.
Oh, I hope not him.
So Moshe, Vayomer alehem Moshe ben mea v'yesrim shana nochi hayom. Moshe says, I'm 120 years old today. Lo uchal od latzeit v'lavo. I can no longer go out and come in, whatever that means. And we're going to explore that together. V'Hashem amar elai, and Hashem said to me, Lo ta'avor ta'yarden hazeh, you shall not cross this Jordan River, meaning you're not going to end up where you thought you were going to go to. And Rashi here makes a comment that has always fascinated me, and I'd like to share with you 2 or 3 interpretations on this Rashi, depending upon the time that we have this evening. So what is the Rashi? If you take a look at the Rashi, right on the bottom of Vayelech Moshe. So Vayelech Moshe, and Rashi says here, on the first Vayelech, the first Dibur HaMatchil, Vigoy, Vav, Gimel, Vav, and an apostrophe, which basically means, etc., etc., etc. Or as the Israelis might say, v'chule, v'chule, v'chule. So our question that we have this evening is, what is Rashi adding to our understanding of this pasuk, and what's bothering Rashi in the colloquial term? And it's a fascinating Rashi. It's not even, it doesn't even have any words, but it's actually giving us a very, very strong message here. And someone once said to me that this is actually a misprint, and it means nothing, that someone way back when put it in, and it just remained. The truth is, it means something very profound, It's not a misprint. And what's obviously bothering Rashi is the following. Vayelech Moshe. Moshe went. Where did Moshe go? This is the last day of Moshe's life. Moshe isn't going anyplace anymore. I mean, what do you mean by Yelech Moshe? Moshe's life over here, Ben Mea v'Yesrim Shana. Apparently, it seems like it's coming to an end. And in fact, the very next pasuk says, Lo ucha od latzed v'lavo. I can't go out or come in anymore. I'm not going anywhere. This is the end of my life. And yet, the parsha begins by saying, it's not the end, but Vayelech, that Moshe is actually going. A great Talmud Chacham and Rav in Yerushalayim, Rabbi Yosef Zevin, who is well known for many of his great works. He has the Sipurei Chasidim, but he also has the L'Torah V'Lahora, and he has several essays on the Chumash. And in one of them, he says that it's really, and he's not really talking about Rashi, he's really explaining the words of Vayelech Moshe. So on these words of Vayelech Moshe, he says, Lehechan halach, where did he go from? Reb Zevin was one of the editors of the Encyclopedia Talmudit, so he was very focused on grammar, on words, and the meaning of the words. La'an halach, where did Moshe go? The Torah doesn't tell us. It just sort of leaves us with Vayelech Moshe. So he says, Ha'amida v'halicha lo lezu keneged zu. Standing still and moving or going are not similar. And that's the first comparison. He says, you want to learn something? Learn from the opposite. And there's definitely an advantage in going rather than standing still. And sometimes standing still is more advantageous than moving. When is that true? And what does it depend upon? So he tells us, Hadavar talui la'an ha'adam holechet. It all depends upon what direction a person is heading in. If a person is going in the right direction, then of course, going is more advantageous than standing still. But what happens when you're going, quote unquote, in the wrong direction? If you're going in the wrong direction, the best and wisest thing to do is to get off at the next exit and turn around and start going back. So under those circumstances, to stop is the advantage. And it all depends upon where the person is going. If a person is going toward his destination, the more you go, the closer you get. Going, in that case, is better than standing still. Avolim holech b'kivun lo nachon, Reb Zevin says, but what happens if a person is going in the wrong direction? And certainly, if they're going in the opposite direction, it's not that he's gone off a bit, he's going in the completely wrong direction. He's lost. Havehu ta'ut haderech. And the more he keeps going, the more he's going to wonder. So the first thing he has to do, says Reb Zevin, is ha'amida. You have to stop. You have to make an assessment. You have to figure out where you're going and where you're supposed to go. First stop, then decide where to go. You have to stop so that you don't continue to err. And then you can think about and ponder and meditate until you find the right way. So that's number one. So if we want to talk about the first lesson in leadership is finding the right direction. And sometimes our leaders tell us, let's stop for a moment. We think we're heading in the right direction, but let's stop and let's make an assessment. And once we do that, we can understand where we need to go further. Number two, Reb Zevin says that in Tanakh, we find an essential difference between a malach and an adam. And the difference is as follows. Bnei adam nikraim mehalchim, human beings are called goers. V'nikud l'malachim shenikraim omdim. And this is in distinction to malachim, who are called stationary or standing still. Takatuv, as it says, srafim omdim mimalo. Srafim, the heavenly angels, are standing on high, above, near God, on either side of the heavenly throne. And it also says in Sefer Zechariah, V'natati lecha mahalchim bein ha'omdim ha'eleh. Zechariah the Navi sees angels, and Hashem says, I will let you move amongst these stationary ones. So angels are called stationary. And he, God, is going to explain that the very essential nature of malachim and men, when you're comparing the two, a malach is whatever he is at the time of his creation. He doesn't have free will. He can't grow. There's no opportunity for growth. The human being has free will. A human being can grow, or a human being can stagnate and deteriorate, whatever you want. So therefore, Reb Zevin says, whatever level the malachim are at their creation, that is how they remain forever. There's no ups and no downs. But we people, we move and we grow. Yelchu mechayil l'chayil. People move from strength to strength. At every stage in our lives, we should be taking a look and saying, are we doing the right things? Is there something more that we could be doing in our personal observance? And a good leader will often be the paradigm, the dugma ishi of personal growth. And it's always a positive when you hear a leader saying, you know, I think I could do this better. And you look at that person, you say, wow, they're already doing so much. And they already look to be so observant, careful, medactic, fill in the blank with whatever word you'd like. But true leaders will always say, I really have a lot to learn. And I have a lot to, there's a lot of area for my personal growth. And so people go, Yelchu mechayil l'chayil. And it's natural for a person to be very different in the later years of their life as from the time that they are in their earlier years in their life. And that's how it should be. A person should always see themselves as someone who has opportunity to grow. And a person has to yearn and to long to move higher and higher. And there's no end to the extent that a person can rise. And Tanakh says, Gavoa mi'al gavoa shomer hu gavoa. Higher and higher, and yet even higher, you keep going. Now, when do we say a person keeps going, moving higher and higher? When he's going b'derech Torah u'mitzvah. But what happens if a person corrupts that which is straight? Then the opposite is going to happen. The further you keep going, the more you get lost. Shekain gam ha'yetzer hara nikra holech. The yetzer hara is also called one who goes. K'moshe Kasuv, when Natan HaNavi came to David HaMelech after the incident of David and Bathsheba, he tells him the story about a poor man who came into town and came to visit the rich man, and the rich man was going to prepare a meal for the visitor. The rich man took a sheep that belonged to the poor man. So if you take a look in Shmuel Bet, in Perek Yud Bet, Pasuk Dalid, Vayavo halech leish ha'ashir. The guest comes moving to the man who is rich. And the Gemara says this guest is the Yetzer Hara. That's the thing that's moving here. And do you know where it goes? Not mechayil l'chayil, from strength to strength, but it goes midechi al dechi. It pushes a person further and further down. The Gemara says that the Yetzer Hara will continue, and this is sometimes the opposite of the inner drive that we have. It says, you know, do such and such, and tomorrow do such and such, ad she'omer lo, until a man is in the clutches, a person is in the clutches of the Yetzer Hara, and tells him, lecho v'ravod zara, go and worship idols. So how does a person self-correct? What is the process of personal growth? So in the Haftorah, in the first days of Tzam Gedalia, if you take a look in the Navi Yeshaya, it says, Yazov Rasha Darcho v'ish aven machshavotav. It's a song, we have it, it's a popular Hebrew song as well. Let the wicked stop, let him remove himself from the road in which he finds himself. He shouldn't continue to make the same mistake. Now, we know how one little miscalculation, you know, for example, if you have you're traveling in a place where a compass heading is extremely important, whether on Earth or in space. If you're several degrees off of true north, it doesn't make a difference for the first mile or two. But if you're going several hundred miles an hour or several thousand miles an hour, a small miscalculation or a small course deviation will take you several thousand miles away from your intended destination. And this little deviation can ultimately result in millions of light years if you're talking about you know, a spaceship or et cetera, or a satellite. So a person has to stop and then they can return to the correct road. Moshe Rabbeinu, Himtzit Shel Kadosh Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu was the epitome of the very height of the sanctity of Kedushat Yisrael. As it says that when he was at the end of his life, at 120 years old, the Torah testifies, Shekol Yamav Hayamhalech Mechayel L'Chayel. His whole life, he went from strength to strength. Aliyah Achar Aliyah. He rises and he rises. V'lo hutzruch af hapam la'amod. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't have to stop once. He's on this constant path of aliyah. He's on this constant path of self-improvement. Vayelech Moshe, tamid hayom lahalech. He's constantly on the move. He's looking for new projects. He's looking for opportunities in self-improvement. He's looking for that ultimate goal. And this is what Rashi is telling us even more. Because where does the Torah tell us Vayelech Moshe? The Torah tells us that Vayelech Moshe, Moshe was walking, Moshe was going on the last day of his life. Moshe was telling us and modeling for us that even on his last day, he continued to grow and have significant goals. He knew that he wasn't going to live another day, and yet he said, I have to continue. Even on that last day, it never stops. His closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, his Avat Hashem, his Yirat Hashem, he grew and he grew until God brought his life to an end. So Rashi is saying, Vayelech Moshe, etc., etc., etc. He remains a holech until the last moment of his life. Always looking, if we can put it in perspective, to make that aliyah. And in a sense, what Moshe Rabbeinu is doing, he's picking up from the first holech. Hashem appears to Avram and tells him, Lech lecha me'artzecha u'me'moladtecha u'mibeis avicha. Leave your father's home, leave your birthplace. And it says, Vayelech Avram, that Avram went just like Hashem told him to do. And do you know what the significance of Vayelech Avram is, that Avram went? It's a dramatic journey that begins, that's going to change the entire history of the world. Avram marches out of Ur Kasdim, and he's going to bring a message to the world that's going to resonate and resound to the world to this day. And even Paul Johnson, who was a Eino Yehudi, he wrote a history of the Jews, he says that he doesn't know if man would have ever achieved the knowledge of God that Avram had perceived. Maybe yes, maybe no. But there's no question, as Avram marches out of Ur Kasdim, that he's marching out with the greatest message ever given to the world. Avram is the first holech. He's a holech from that point throughout the rest of his life. He goes to Har HaMoriah for the Akedah, and he continues marching throughout all of history. Vayelech Moshe. Moshe grows and grows and continues to be a holech until the very last moment of his life. Incidentally, Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik essentially said the same thing with his very uniquely Soloveitchik brisker analysis or spin in the following sentence. Chayev hu la'adam lichios b'torat gavra ad harega ha'acharon. A person is obligated to be a gavra until the very last moment that he is here on this world. He has to be a gavra. What does a gavra mean in the terminology of, in brisker terminology? There are two terms that have been sanctified by Brisk and by Rav Soloveitchik. And when you learn any type of Torah Sheba'al Peh, you're always using, in a brisker derech, you're using two terms to define the mitzvah or the focus. And those two terms are gavra and cheftza. Gavra is a human being, and cheftza is an object. Now, human beings can conduct themselves as human beings. That means that they have initiative, they have thought, they take a stand, they grow, they move, they accomplish things. And then it's also possible for a person to be a cheftza, an object, sort of tossed and turned in every which direction by all the events around you, and don't react, don't respond as you should. And in a sense, it's the difference between a person who has a destination and in mind, and they have a goal and they have an objective, and they march forward, putting all of their efforts into achieving that goal. And then there's a human being who allows events to carry him in every which direction. And that's chefza. And these are the two terms used by Brisk. You have the chefza and the gavra. So Rav Soloveitchik says, until the last moment of a person's life, he should be a gavra. He should be a person who is moving and accomplishing, taking on new projects, looking for new opportunities. And that's the first Rashi in Parshat Vayelech. Moshe is the gavra, Moshe is the holech, and that's what the Torah demands of every human being. That's the lesson, the second lesson of leadership that Moshe Rabbeinu was telling us. And Rav Soloveitchik ends on somewhat depressing, but a very realistic note, as does the Rambam as well, a sobering note, that regardless of how much a person will grow or achieve, that at the final moment of one's life, a person realizes that they didn't accomplish everything that they wanted to or could have, and maybe a person can never do that. The best that a person can hope for is to try the best that you can. Try new things, try new directions, try new opportunities. And indeed, at the very last moment of life, we move from a gavrav to a chefza. We go from being a holech into something that's more of an object. And this takes us really to the next pshat in the meaning of Vayelech Moshe. And that is, what did Moshe Rabbeinu want more than anything else? What was his greatest wish? The answer, of course, is Moshe prayed and wanted to change God's mind to be able to enter into Eretz Yisrael. And God tells him in the third parak in Veschanon, Lo tavor et hayarden hazeh. You shall not cross over this Jordan. Now, what does Moshe Rabbeinu do? He's having this conversation with Hashem. He's davening to Hashem. He's saying, this is what I would really most like, God. This is what I'm looking for. So Rashi says that on the last day of his life, he's going to march as far as he can towards the Jordan River, as if to say, I'm going. And when Hashem, you want me to stop, you can stop me, but I'm going to keep going as far as I possibly can. And that's the meaning of Vayelech Moshe. Moshe is going to Eretz Yisrael, v'chule, 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 until the last moment of his life. There are times when we never make it to our intended goal, or we know that the goal is perhaps too far off, or maybe it's almost impossible for us to attain. But we still should be showing, and a leadership quality is to be able to go as far as you can. It was the story of Rabbi Avram Parshan. He was this Hasidic Jew, a Lubavitcher Chassid, who lived here in Toronto. And when Rabbi Aaron Cutler was nifter, Rabbi Parshan wanted to go to the Levaya, but because of health reasons, the doctors forbade him to do so. And what does he do? Gets into his car, drives to the airport, turns around, and comes back home. And why does he do that? He says, because that's the best that I could do. I did as much as I was able to do. Vayelech Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael. He's told he can't go. So what? I'm going to go as far as I can. And you want to stop me, Rabbanu Shalom? That's your business. But I'm going to go as far as I can towards Eretz Yisrael. And Rav Soloveitchik says that the proof that a person never really accomplishes everything they want in life is Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't get into Eretz Yisrael. I mean, but he's going to do as much as he can. He's going to go to the airport, and then he's going to come back. No one can stop him from doing that. So just to take a step back, number one pshat of Vayelech Moshe is that Moshe personally grows, looks for new mitzvot, new opportunities until the end of his life. Pshat number two, Moshe goes until the end of his life as far as he can. And pshat number three is something that I discussed in a completely different context, but I'm going to explain the meaning of Rashi's comment of Vayelech Moshe. We could sort of go into back to the often quoted first Rashi at the beginning of the Torah. And it's not a political statement or comment, which is, I am certainly outspoken many times, but this is really a religious statement, and this is coming from Rashi. So you have to understand the nature of where it's coming from. First, Rashi in the Torah tells us, Omer Rabbi Yitzchak, the Torah should have begun with HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, the Torah portion that we're going to read this week in Parshas Bo. Since the Torah is a book of legislation, Sefer HaMitzvot, that also has history in it, it should have begun with the first mitzvah, the first act of legislation, which is HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem. God tells Moshe and Aaron, this month of Nisan is going to be the first of all months for you. Umatam Pasach beBereshis, and why indeed does the Torah begin with Bereshis? So Mishum Koach Masa Vigid La'am Laseis Lahem Nachlas Goyim, because of the following pasuk in Tehillim that tells us the strength of God's works to His people in order to give them the inheritance of the nations. She'im Yomru Umot Ha'olam LiYisrael, that if the nations of the world are going to say to the Jewish people, Listim Atem, you're thieves. Shekibashtem Artzos Shiva Goyim, because you have conquered and seized and occupied the land of the seven nations. Heimomrim lahem, the Jews can say to them, Kol ha'aretz shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Eretz Yisrael belongs to God. God decided to give Eretz Yisrael to Am Yisrael. God who bara, God created the world. Unasana lasher yasha beinav, and He gives it to the one who is right in His eyes. Uvritzona natlon mehem, and it was God's will to take it from one and give it to the other. Unasana lanu, and to give it to us, to the Jewish people. So therefore, we need the story of creation in order to establish the idea that God owns and created and made the world, and therefore it's God's choice what to do as He desires. And what it means is that for 900 some odd years since Rashi, one had to learn this Rashi with a great leap of faith. In concentration camps and in death camps, where Jews didn't own the shirts on their own backs, sometimes moments before death, this Rashi was learned. And someone would ask, from whom did we take anything? What's Rashi talking about? And someone, perhaps a Rebbe or a Rav, would say, most probably with tears streaming down his cheeks, would say, if Rashi said it, have faith that it will be true. And we are the generation that was Zocha, that every word of Rashi was true, in spite of the fact that some Jews condemn Medinat Yisrael and will say that we ourselves, and sometimes it's an internal fight that we have to fight, that we are occupiers. Rashi was right. 900 years, Rashi was right. We don't have to take a leap of faith anymore in order to understand this Rashi. And Rashi called the shots correctly. That's my political statement for the moment. But the question I'm asking is not why does the Torah begin with creation and not the first mitzvah of HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, but indeed is, but why indeed is HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem the first mitzvah of the Torah that Hashem communicates to His people? What's this mitzvah all about, and how are we connecting it back to our theme today? It's a mitzvah that calls upon us to create and calculate the calendar. Our calendar is according to the lunar month, and that's all that this entails. Now, is this really an inspiring mitzvah? The mitzvah of astronomic calculations? I mean, why not the first mitzvah being V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, or Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad? Why is the mitzvah of calculating the calendar the first mitzvah in the Torah? And you know why it's of the greatest significance, especially to a people enslaved in Mitzrayim? God is ready to take them out and bring them out to freedom. Why is this the most important mitzvah? The mitzvah in Maseches Rosh Hashanah, in the very beginning, as we're going to describe this mitzvah, the Mishnah, Maseches Rosh Hashanah, in the very beginning tells us that there are a number of Rosh Hashanah. There are a number of New Years. We know that the first Rosh Hashanah is Rosh Hashanah LeMelachim, the first of Nisan. And it's the Rosh Hashanah for new kings. King of Israel ascends the throne anytime during the year, but when Rosh Chodesh Nisan comes, it's the beginning of the second year of his reign. And the year switches in Nisan. The kings of all other nations, we calculate their reign from Tishrei. So what does this mean? Tishrei represents the beginning of the agricultural year, the year of nature in Israel. I mean, everything revolves around Israel, as we know. 1 billion people could be starving and dying from various diseases, but a single Jew builds a sukkah in Beit El, and the UN is going to meet to discuss the illegal building and expansion in occupied territories. The planting season is going to begin. The rains will come, and God willing, that's the natural year, Tishrei. The nations of the world, their government, they fall under the category of nature. Eretz Israel, our year in terms of months begins with Nisan, begins with Nes, begins with miracle, because that was the month in which miracles were done for the Jewish people. Our history is, I would say, qualitatively different than the history of the world, of all civilizations. Civilizations will come and go, but as many historians have explained, the pattern is that Israel is different, and we don't follow the pattern. So we are different than the rest of the world. It's not the past and the present that determine us, but Jewish history is determined in advance by God. And it was determined thousands of years ago by the Nevi'im, and how they told us that there would be a return of Jews back to Eretz Israel. In other words, the events of our days have been predetermined years ago. Every nation in the world has their history. It's linear, it's chronological, it's cause and effect, it's natural, except the Jewish people. Our goal and our focus was established by God. It's supernatural, it's Nisan, it's full of Nisan. Otherwise, it's impossible to explain our existence by nature, by law, and by history. And we should have otherwise been extinct, finished and gone forever. But we know that on Zayin Adar, the day that Moshe Rabbeinu died, he was born for all eternity. Vayelech Moshe v'gomer. Moshe goes through all of Jewish history. Moshe lives in every generation. The influence and impact of Moshe Rabbeinu continues to impact us throughout our history. Every anti-Semite from the beginning of time thought that somehow they were going to destroy the Jewish people, from Amalek to Bavel to Rome, the Catholics, Kelniki, Hitler Yamach Shemo, to the Muslim radicals of today. And they think and they believe that you can destroy the Jewish people. But if you have a mindset like Moshe Rabbeinu, Vayelech Moshe, we keep going. We look for opportunities to strengthen the Jewish people, both inside of Israel and in the diaspora as well. And we know what the end of history is going to be. Ultimately, in spite of today's events and whatever challenges that we have, that Eretz Yisrael will belong to the people of Israel, because the Tanakh says that it will be. And there will be difficult times. There will be times of sadness for us as a people as a whole, and there will be sad times for us as individuals. But ultimately, it will all happen the way the Torah says it will happen. And Rashi, with one word, tells us is making an unbelievable statement about Jewish history. Do you think that Moshe Rabbeinu, when Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, that his dream died? Vayelech Moshe, Moshe continues to go. to this day. And that day that Moshe was supposed to die, on that day, Moshe was born as well for all eternity. The thoughts that Moshe had throughout his life about personal growth, the thoughts that Moshe had about doing the ultimate that he can, the thoughts that Moshe had about being a holech. Moshe is described at the end of his life as an individual who was eternally young. What makes us young? When you think young. When you don't think that you've accomplished everything that you can in your life, but you say, where can I take my skill set next? What organization, what program would perhaps benefit from the experiences that I've had in my life? And when I think about Paul, I think that describes him very, if not succinctly, but very well. Pesach David ben Avram was a holech. From the moment that he recognized that he himself could be a better person, he became self-taught in many areas. He became about tefillah, about koreh, and he said, these are things that I want to learn. I want to grow, and I want to take on these new opportunities in Jewish life that I can in my current surroundings. So it started out in his personal life. And of course, the vehicle for that was the shul was at B'nai Torah. And then looking around at other opportunities, he said, doesn't seem to be that, or it seems to me that I can take some of my skills that I learned in business and perhaps I can utilize it for the benefit of the shul. And the moment he said that, he was probably thinking out loud. Someone probably said, Paul, you're the next president of the shul. And that's what happens when you think out loud about your skill sets in shul, you get elected president. That was a very good thing for Paul. And it was a very good thing for the shul. And it was a very good thing for the community. And Paul blossomed, and so did the shul. And then there was a time that Paul said, okay, I think I've done just about as much as I can for the shul. I'd like to begin training my successor there, but that didn't stop him there. He then came to Mizrahi and he said, there's a couple of things that I have from my experience I think that could be helpful to you, Rabbi Rosenberg. And the moment he said that out loud, I think Jack Samuel and a couple of other individuals who were around at the time and said, hey, Paul, I think we have an opportunity for you over here. And he was quickly moved into a leadership and a position at Mizrahi. And I know that Paul enjoyed it so much, and we certainly benefited from all of his experiences as well. And at a certain point, Paul said, I think I've done everything that I possibly can for the Toronto Jewish community and for the Israeli community and for Israel from Chutz La'aretz. I really now have to be in it to really have the greatest impact. And his thoughts drew him and Annie towards Aliyah. Regrettably, that stage or that next step didn't happen. But it didn't stop Paul from making all the plans, from being a mahalech, from continuing to walk in that direction and to do as much as he possibly could. There are so many things that leadership lessons and in general, and certainly as they apply to our Jewish lives, our own personal observances and our own capacity, that I think what Paul showed us is that never underestimate yourself. There are talents, there are abilities that you may not even believe that can be helpful or that can be useful. But sometimes it takes a moment. We have to assess. We have to stop for a moment and see where we're headed to. Are we headed in that right direction? And if it's possible somehow to add, to grow, and to look further, then that's what one should do. And it's a multi-step process. And Paul showed us that throughout his life, how one can take small steps that lead in that right direction. I think that our learning tonight certainly is for all of us, and when I say us, I say for myself, it's sometimes a little bit sobering to think back on the extent and the accomplishments of a person's life. Family certainly has a different perspective than community, and I know that Paul's loving family was very lucky and to have him as a husband, as a father, as a grandfather, and all of us were lucky to have him as a friend, as a mentor, and as an individual who really helped us in many different ways. And there are so many of us who, I mean, and we know this just in thinking back, and I can't believe already that it's the third Yahrzeit already, but there's so many more people who would tell you, but probably out of their own personal humility, will tell you about how Paul helped them in many quiet ways to reach their destinations, whether through financial assistance or personal assistance. Paul was there for us. Let's continue to utilize his memory and those things that we've learned from him in our own lives, in our families, and in the organizations that we serve, and in the organizations in our community, and the opportunities that we haven't yet recognized. Let's continue to be a mahalech in every area of our life that we can, and that way, indeed, we will bring a true zechira and a true zikaron and a true aliyah to the neshama of Pesach David ben Avram Zecher Lebracha. I want to just open up for a moment, if we could unmute. I'd like to take this opportunity for any of the Paul and Annie's family to make any closing comments, if you'd like, and then we'll close the evening.
I can't thank you enough. I am amazed at how much you captured, Paul, Oliver Shalom. It sounds crazy, but for a change, I have no words. You were awesome, awesome. I really am very, very pleased. I'm glad we chose you. You did him such justice and captured him beautifully. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure. Any of the children, if you just want to, any reminiscing is also appropriate. It's, you're amongst friends here, and you're more than welcome to do so if you feel comfortable. Okay. I want to thank everyone for joining us, and with God's help, we will look forward to seeing you. Please come and join us on the Tu B'Shvat Kiddush on February 4th at B'nai Torah, and with God's help, we'll have other opportunities to be together for good reasons, and for continued smachot in all of our families. Thank you so much, everyone, for
Thank you.
joining us this
Thank
evening.
you.
Yeah,
Wonderful share.
captured him very well.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Rabbi.
Thank
Well
you.
done.
It's a pleasure seeing all of you virtually, and we'd love to see you all in person as well.